Hochman says the only realistic way the brothers would be released before Thanksgiving is if Governor Newsom grants them clemency.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we'll be looking at the most notable individuals who served time in prison and either already have or could potentially secure their release between 2024 and 2025.
Mr. Assange, I have no doubt, will be a continuing force for freedom of his speech.
Demetrius Big Meech Flenory. In 1985, Demetrius Big Meech Flenory and his brother Terry founded the Black Mafia family, creating one of the most notorious drug trafficking rings in the United States.
When you hear Black Mafia family, just the word mafia scares people.
Their operation soon drew federal attention, and by 2008, both brothers were sentenced to 30 years in prison for trafficking and money laundering.
They were each sentenced to 30 years in federal prison.
In 2020, they sought early release due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, only Terry's request was granted. Flenory, on the other hand, remained behind bars until October 16, 2024, when he was allowed to leave federal prison and serve the remainder of his time at a residential reentry program.
In 2020, Terry Flenory was released, and just this week, Big Meech was released from prison. He will serve the remainder of his sentence at a halfway house in Miami.
His official sentence concludes in January 2026. Rayful Edmond III. In the 1980s, the drug epidemic in Washington, D.C. was largely fueled by one man, Rayful Edmond III.
When crack was the hustle here in the nation's capital back in the 1980s, nobody, absolutely nobody, worked harder than Rayful Edmond III.
By his early 20s, Edmond had already built a drug empire, raking in around $300 million annually. In 1989, when he was just 24, Edmond was arrested on numerous charges, including drug trafficking, operating a criminal enterprise, and racketeering. He was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without parole.
When it was over, the punishment for the convicted 24-year-old Rayful Edmond included 2 life sentences with no chance of parole.
However, even behind bars, Edmond continued to deal drugs, and after he was caught, he struck a deal with the government, agreeing to become an informant. In July 2024, after decades behind bars, Edmond was granted early release and transferred to a halfway house at an unknown location in either Kentucky or Tennessee.
Rayful Edmond was for a long time a government informant, and his information helped to put other drug dealers here in D.C. behind bars. And yet, guys, when he left prison, he did not do so under an assumed name or in the Witness Protection Program.
Kingsley Pickett. On Christmas night in 1991, Western Australia was rocked by a tragic incident.
The family was driving home on Christmas night. Their car was hit by a stolen vehicle being chased by police.
A car crashed into a pregnant woman and her young son, killing them both. The driver was Kingsley Pickett, who had stolen a vehicle and was trying to evade police. But this wouldn't be Pickett's first or last brush with the law. He racked up a lengthy record and was frequently in and out of prison.
He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter, but it would not be his last conviction.
For the manslaughter charges, Pickett only received a custodial sentence, and when he was released again, he continued his criminal behavior, breaking into a woman's home and sexually assaulting her. Despite being considered a high-risk serious offender by prosecutors, Pickett was granted early release in February 2024 under a 5-year supervision order.
His case has been regularly reviewed, and now after decades in custody, a Supreme Court judge has ruled he can be released on a strict supervision order.
YFN Lucci. You might remember YFN Lucci from his 2016 hits, Key to the Streets and Every Day We Lit.
Every day we lit, every day we lit, every day we lit, yeah.
A rising rapper, his career took a dramatic turn in 2021 when he became the focus of a statewide manhunt after he was indicted in a 105-count RICO case with 11 others. Prosecutors claimed Lucci was affiliated with the Bloods and had been involved in murder, assault, and racketeering.
He's been in jail since January 2021, originally facing a slew of charges, including murder. Prosecutors say he was the driver in a gang-related drive-by shooting which killed a man back in December of 2020.
As he was denied bond, Lucci awaited trial behind bars until January 2024, when he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 10 years of probation. With credit for time served, Lucci's label announced a tentative parole date for January 2025, when he could potentially regain his freedom.
But because of the charge that he pled to, under the parole guidelines, he's eligible in 1/3 of 10 years.
Changpeng Zhao. A titan in the crypto world, Changpeng Zhao founded Binance in 2017 and built it into the world's top cryptocurrency exchange.
We use all the industry common platforms like chain analysis, elliptic, TRM for transaction monitoring. It's the same tools used by law enforcement.
However, the U.S. Department of Justice later alleged that under his leadership, the platform became a hub for criminal activity, enabling money laundering activities linked to drug trafficking and terrorism.
As you know, there have been reports about investigations about money laundering through Binance related to Iran.
In November 2023, Zhao reached a plea deal with federal agents, which saw him step down as the CEO of Binance and pay a $50 million fine. Although prosecutors had asked for a 3-year term, Zhao was ultimately sentenced to 4 months in prison. He eventually regained his freedom in September 2024 and soon turned his focus to his next big project, Young Thug. In what became the longest criminal trial in Georgia's history, rapper Young Thug was one of 28 people indicted in a sweeping 56-count RICO investigation.
This is video from court of Young Thug in a blue jumpsuit. The rapper and 28 other defendants charged in a 56-count indictment alleging street gang activity, including robbery and murder.
Authorities alleged that Thug's record label, YSL, had operated both as a music outfit and a criminal street gang. Thug was arrested in May 2022 and repeatedly denied bond, which meant he had to sit in jail while awaiting trial.
It took us 10 months just to get to the point of opening statements because of allegations of drugs being brought into the court. Attorneys were arrested for allegedly throwing cell phones as they were getting arrested for having pills in their bottle and assaulting officers. There's just so much drama that led to this point.
In October 2024, after more than 2 years behind bars, he reached a plea deal with prosecutors, receiving a total sentence of 40 years. This included 5 years in prison, which was commuted to time served, 15 years of probation, and a potential 20-year sentence, should he violate probation. He was subsequently released from jail.
What we can confirm is he is now a free man for the first time in 2.5 years.
Steve Bannon. After leading Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, Steve Bannon became his chief strategist upon his election.
We were trying to drive this populist movement. Yeah. You know, Donald Trump came along at a time that this populist movement was starting to get going, and he really took it 10 years into the future.
However, he held this role for only 7 months before he was fired. Despite the split, Bannon remained closely tied to Trump, a connection that eventually landed him in prison.
Today, the former advisor to Donald Trump, who wears 2 button-down shirts on top of each other for no discernible reason, was ordered to report to prison for 4 months starting on July 1st for his conviction on federal contempt of Congress charges nearly 2 years ago.
Following his refusal to appear before the U.S. House Committee investigating the January 6 attack on the Capitol, Bannon was found guilty of contempt of Congress. This earned him a sentence of 4 months in prison and a $6,500 fine. Though he appealed this conviction, Bannon ultimately served his sentence from July to October 2024, gaining release just 1 week before the 3rd consecutive presidential election involving his former boss. Yolanda Saldivar. All it took was 3 hours for a jury to find Yolanda Saldivar guilty of murder and send her to prison.
It is a verdict that thousands of Selena fans have been hoping for, and they believe justice has been done tonight.
Saldivar's victim was none other than Selena, the beloved Tejano singer with whom she had developed a close bond, serving as both the president of her fan club and manager of her boutiques. However, when it was discovered that Saldivar had been swindling money from Selena, she was fired from both roles.
There was money missing everywhere. Mr. Quintanilla brought all the evidence he had discovered. He brought all these checks and asked Yolanda point blank, how do you explain this? Yolanda had no explanation, none whatsoever.
In retaliation, Saldivar fatally shot Selena at a motel in Corpus Christi on March 31st, 1995. She then threatened to take her own life, but was ultimately apprehended. Saldivar was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years, which is set for March 2025. Lyle and Eric Menendez. On August 20th, 1989, Jose and Kitty Menendez were murdered in their Beverly Hills home, leaving behind their 2 sons, Lyle and Eric.
No signs of a break-in or a burglary, only the bodies of entertainment executive Jose Menendez and his wife Kitty in the family TV room, torn by shotgun blast that one of the neighbor kids heard.
Initially, the brothers claimed unknown intruders were responsible, but their extravagant spending soon raised suspicions. Eventually, Eric confessed to a psychologist, whose ex-girlfriend later reported it to the police, resulting in the brothers' arrest. Their first trial ended with 2 deadlocked juries, but in 1996, a second trial convicted both of first-degree murder, sentencing them to life without parole.
At the jury's recommendation, the brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Since then, the case has received renewed attention due to dramatizations like Ryan Murphy's Monsters. This led the Los Angeles District Attorney to recommend a resentencing in October 2024, which could see the brothers released by December 2024 or early 2025.
Now, there is a hearing scheduled for late November, which might see the brothers freed.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Julian Assange. As the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange gained notoriety in 2010 for publishing classified US government documents leaked by Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning.
That soldier downloaded an absolute trove of US secrets and sent them to Julian Assange. Most of the leaks were highly classified, and some arguably endangered lives.
These files revealed sensitive military information, particularly about the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. In 2019, the US charged Assange with espionage and sought his extradition from the UK, where he had been detained after years of asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Julian Assange struck a deal with Ecuador. It agreed to give him asylum, and he hid here in its embassy, beyond the reaches of the law.
However, this proved to be a protracted and complex legal process. In the end, Assange struck a deal with US prosecutors, pleading guilty to one charge in exchange for a 62-month sentence, which was commuted to time served. In June 2024, he was released from prison in the UK and returned to his native Australia.
Julian Assange was sentenced to 5 years, time he'd already served inside the UK's high-security Belmarsh prison, meaning he was officially free.
What other famous people currently in prison would you like to see gain release? Let us know in the comments below.
We know what we have to do now.
What?